Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, October 1st. I'm your host, David Papadopoulos. As the U.S. presidential campaign heats up, we have politics on the brain once again. Over the weekend, Bloomberg published this really terrific piece of data journalism showing how this obscure, dark term from a far-right figure in Austria has now entered American politics, and in a big way. And Elon, it turns out, had a big hand in promoting this. We'll then take a hard pivot and touch a little bit on Tesla's third quarter sales, which are due out on Wednesday and appear, by all accounts, to have rebounded. And then we're going to feature a fun conversation between friend of the pod, Kurt Wagner, and Jack Sweeney, who built the infamous ElonJet tracker. Now, back in high school, Jack got himself into a little bit of trouble for publicly tracking the private planes of Elon and other celebrities on social media. And to this day, Jack's accounts are closely monitored. We're going to start in Vienna, where we have reporter Jonathan Tirone, one of the authors on that data journalism story on the alarming trend where we see the use of the term remigration grow and grow across social media. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
And I have our two regulars with me here in the studio, Max Chafkin. Max, hello.
Hey, David.
And Dana Hull. Dana, how are you?
Always a pleasure to be here.
So, Jonathan, for the uninitiated out there, tell us, what is this term remigration?
Remigration used to be an obscure social science term that burst onto the international scene, at least here first in Europe in January. It was formerly used by mostly sociologists to describe the voluntary return of Jewish people after World War II. It was reappropriated by right-wing extremists over the last 10 years to mean the forced expulsion of minority groups, mostly Africans, Arabs, and Muslims from Europe. It really took off in January after an investigative report discovered German politicians sitting down with this right-wing radical from Austria. And when I say radical, we're talking really right-wing. He received money from the Christchurch killer who in 2019 murdered 51 people. He's mixed up with some really bad stuff, has the attention of intelligence agencies, the equivalent of the FBI in Austria. He's really far right. He was meeting with mainline politicians in Germany and in Austria discussing this word remigration as a strategic imperative for European conservative parties. In January, we see it bursting through Alphabet trend analytics. Our contribution is then to use this sophisticated social media tracking platform where we can go back and examine 8 months of online data to see how this word remigration is pinging about. What we find is that 97% of the traffic that we study is actually coming on Elon Musk's Twitter. And what we were surprised to find is that he actually had a direct connection to some of this amplification.
And when you say a direct connection, Jonathan, what does a direct connection look like?
Well, for example, I mean, the way these guys operate, the people who are promoting remigration, they're very sophisticated in their online and offline interactions. So on March 8th, this young radical in Austria, he gets invited back onto Twitter after a 4-year ban. The first thing he does is he goes on and he thanks Elon for letting him back onto the platform. And then the next day, he goes out and makes some content. there's only three people, but they choose a strategic location. On March 9th, the day after getting back onto X, they scale the front of the Fundamental Rights Agency, which is based in Vienna. It's the equivalent of the human rights watchdog. They occupy the balcony for 3 hours, far more police and far more firefighters than demonstrators, but that's not the point. Because after they get hauled down, they start making videos, and we can see then as we're tracking the data how their mentions and their likes, the amplification of their message is exploding online. It more than doubles overnight and remains at a high level for days after that. Then the young Austrian radical actually gets hauled off in handcuffs. And that's where Musk steps in. He messages him directly and asks whether it's even legal for him to be arrested for talking about remigration. And that's when, you see Elon Musk, if he gets in touch with you directly over the platform, then your engagements really take off. And that's when it starts climbing, rocketing.
Yeah, the piece, that is very interesting and truly does, shed some light on how, Max, you get to this figure. I mean, 97% of all references to this term appearing on X, I suppose if it were 27 or 47 or wherever, you could say, oh, whatever, random skew it, or 97% is an incredible number.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's such a high number that you'd be sort of tempted to ask, does this exist without Elon Musk? But reading the story, I do think it does, and I think what it actually shows is more the centrality of Musk's role in the kind of like far-right information space. Like, if we were talking about this 10 years ago, there were other places where these ideas were bubbling up. There were sort of the more niche social media platforms, 4chan and the like, and then you had kind of Fox News, some of the sort of further right parts of Fox News, and it really feels like Musk is kind of occupying both of those spaces, occupying both the edgelord, kind of master of ceremonies for the edgelord right, and master of ceremonies for the actual right, or the kind of most ideological part of the actual right. And so, you have these kind of hard right ideas on immigration going from some random guy in Austria to, the mouth of the president.
Yeah, and
former president, excuse me.
Yeah, it's become mainstreamed in a way, right? I mean, there's always been right-wing spaces or more conservative spaces. Talk radio was huge in the 80s, Reddit, 4chan, Telegram, all kinds of podcasts, but this seems to be sort of like the mainstreaming of views that people once thought were fringe, and then because they are on X, they're getting amplified, and then they start entering like the mainstream conversation because people start using the words, the president starts using the word, and it's very tactical and it's very orchestrated. And I would imagine, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but are these people that are kind of interacting with Elon Musk, are they also being paid by X? Like, are they monetizing their accounts?
Well, I mean, there's a parallel investigation by a Swedish agency that did find that one of the most popular X accounts promoting this concept of remigration is actually a Dubai-based outfit that is actually doing it for the ad revenue. So, I mean, there's that angle, absolutely. But just generally speaking, I mean, before the internet came along, we used to call this like glorification of violence, for example, right? You have movies that glorify violence. And this is like, again, what we're seeing over the course of this investigation. There are horrible things. There are horrible crimes. And there are riots, like the race riots that took place in the UK over the summertime. And because everybody has a video production studio in their pocket these days, those images do go viral. But it's the difference then of having Mr. Musk come on and saying civil war is inevitable, as he did in late July in response to some of these images of violence.
Yeah, in the UK, right. Yeah.
Versus somebody calling for a level-headed response that is socially acceptable. And, what we've found is simply, that this extreme content is amplified, a raging scream around this issue of remigration.
Jonathan, I want to ask you on that for a second, that the term, I imagine, remigration means different things to different people. I mean, my understanding is some are calling for it for everyone who's in the country or in a given country illegally. Others are saying, no, that doesn't go far enough. not only do we need to drive out those who are in the country illegally, but also many of those who are here legally. Walk us through, the different kinds of interpretations you have.
Yeah, so let's start with what we know. So September 29th, the Freedom Party, the far-right party in Austria, won the most votes in the national elections. They've adopted remigration as a primary policy platform. They want to put pressure on any foreign-born person who doesn't adopt the, quote, dominant culture. They want to institute a so-called identity-based migration policy, expel asylum seekers. They name in their policy platform going into the vote that they want to remove millions of people across the European Union who do not meet their criteria and send them to a North African, made-up city. So basically, we're talking about remigration in its official form as something equivalent to mass deportation.
Now, Max, so it goes from something that's largely in Europe and it jumps over the Atlantic and comes to the United States of America in a big way, as Jonathan was indicating. And a big part of that moment was when Trump posted about it himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to say, in the context of domestic politics, U.S. politics, this is like a euphemism. It's not like Trump is importing these crazy far-right Austrian ideas. It's that he's importing a way of talking about the ideas that are already here and that he's already basically put forward as a proposal. He's saying he's going to deport millions of people. And so remigration is just kind of like a euphemistic way of signaling it, or perhaps a way of signaling affinity with some of these, extremists on Twitter.
Unless I'm not hearing correctly, I've never heard him or the party say that people who are here legally and have U.S. passports.
U.S. passports. There's a question of asylum seekers who are here legally, who I think at various times he has implied that would have to go home.
Jonathan, now that we're here in the U.S., we're going to talk a little bit about more about Elon and U.S. politics. And so we are going to let you go. But thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so Dana, now Elon's PAC is indeed contributing quite a bit to the Trump campaign and to its messaging. What's its spending up to now?
Yeah, so it's called America PAC, and to date, they've spent $68 million just to elect Donald Trump. That does not include the sort of millions that are being spent on down-ballot races in a lot of competitive House districts. But that's a significant number. I mean, Elon's PAC has emerged as one of the key PACs that is supporting Trump this cycle. And it's hard to know exactly how the ground game is going in all of these swing states, but we've seen the mailers. We are definitely looking at all of the digital ads and then the sort of big in-kind contribution that Musk is giving Trump, which is basically what he's spouting on, X almost nonstop these days.
I'm almost going to retract my point because Dana points out that the biggest contribution that Elon has made to Trump has to do with his posting and his use of X. That said, remember when we first learned that Elon Musk was going to donate a lot of money to Trump, there were reports that he was saying he was going to donate $45 million a month, which he sort of kind of half denied or backed down from or whatever, kind of threw into some doubt. Well, we have some sense now, right? Because $68 million. So that suggests—
do the math, Max.
That suggests, right, that Elon Musk has not ponied up the most extreme amount that he might have. I think it's fair to say he's not donating $45 million a month. That said, he is donating a lot of money. Now, remember, when this PAC was started, Elon Musk had not yet donated, I think, Dana, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I think a little less than $10 million had been in there to—
Actually, there's no FEC filing at all that shows that Elon Musk has donated squat. It's all his friends.
Right. No, but my assumption is those filings were very early, before the reports came out that Elon Musk was going to make the contribution. I think it's fair to assume that the money that's come in now, much of that has come from Elon Musk, if not all of it. But we do not know and will not know until we get filings. So, if you're trying to decide, somewhere, is it $45 million a month? Is it more or less than $45 million? To me, we're looking probably in the $50 million range. But again, that's just a guess based on these filings.
I think that's fair there. I mean, they are clearly spending millions of dollars that is coming from somewhere. We'll find out October 15th just how much
It's
Musk
possible
put in.
that the Jimmy Johns guy, who was an early donor to this PAC, or Joe Lonsdale will turn out to be like a Sheldon Adelson level Trump backer. I think it's very likely that much of this money, if not all of it, that's come in, since Musk began contributing, is Musk money.
Okay, so that's those are the figures on the money eking on behalf of Trump as part of the implicit agreement here. The Guardian ran the math the other day. 24 hours of Elon Musk on X, 145 ekses, roughly 6 an hour, roughly 1 every 10 minutes. Now, Max, I'm guessing he's sleeping for a few hours
some
here.
Of these ekses, David, are very long, right? You think of like, oh, that's only, 100 ekses times 140 characters or whatever. Right. Like, it's not that much. But no. Elon is taking full advantage of the long form capabilities of ekes.
There was a rant in there, wasn't
right?
there
I've
not?
got it pulled up. Over the weekend, he posted a somewhat long post that basically said that if Trump is not elected, this will be the last American election. Basically, if we do not support Trump, American democracy will end. And then
So turning what the Democrats say on its head, Mr. Musk is here.
Turning what some in the activist corners of the Democratic Party say on its head. And his justification for this was honestly like a version of the Great Replacement theory. Basically that the Democrats have been importing immigrants so that they can sort of swing the United States to a permanent, one-party state. If only one, and he wrote, if even 1 in 20 illegals. Now, again, that is not that's not the preferred term for referring to undocumented people, but 1 in 20 illegals become citizens per year, something that the Democrats are expediting as fast as humanly possible. That would mean about 2 million new legal voters. He goes on and on. Basically, you got to get involved or the Democrats are going to, control America forever. He's sort of just on the regular expressing such racism and conspiratorial thoughts all the time. But like, this is a very extreme thing that he's saying. And it has, it creates a sense of urgency if you're perhaps a Trump voter or somebody who's inclined this way already.
Yeah. Dana, if we can talk about Elon's company, his biggest company for a second, it's going to come out and release third quarter deliveries tomorrow. And lo and behold, they are on the mend.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I constantly want to push back on, which is like a very common narrative, is everyone in the United States has this idea that, like, oh my God, Elon Musk is such a right-wing nutbag, like Tesla sales are going to crater, it's brand erosion, he's torching the brand, no one's ever going to buy an EV, but
that's only Max that says
global auto market. Well, Max and I have written stories together that have looked at this, but we live in a global auto market. Tesla has a huge advantage when it comes to electric vehicles because of its supercharging network and its over-the-air software updates and its range and a lot of other things. And sales have really perked up in China. So we're going to get delivery figures tomorrow. Bloomberg consensus is like 464,000 units. That's like a big comeback. That would be like a year-over-year increase from the third quarter a year ago. So we won't know until we actually get the delivery figures, but there are signs that, that sales have recovered mostly thanks to China, which is like all in on EVs and has these great incentives.
But also not necessarily a commentary on, like, it doesn't, if Tesla sales go down, it doesn't mean it was because Elon tweeted, but if it goes up, it doesn't mean that, the world's automotive buyers now are like, great. Thank God Elon is warning us of these migrant conspiracies.
No, but Max, I will tell you, because you're a Cybertruck skeptic, let us say, and that you're not sure it's ever going to amount to more than a rounding error in Tesla earnings. Indications are, apparently, that they sold a decent chunk of them in the third quarter.
Indications are? What
Dana,
does that
help me out
mean?
here. Dana, what does that mean?
Oh, well, you mean the Cybertruck? Yeah, no, I mean,
put Max in his place.
I am seeing more Cybertrucks on the road here in California. They also just started delivering Cybertrucks in Mexico. And, there's even some hurricane photos about like, oh, my Cybertruck has been great in the hurricane in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I think some of the estimates are like maybe they did 20,000 Cybertruck sales this quarter.
These are not large numbers.
That's 7,000 a month.
this is impressive compared to a bunch of other electric trucks that are also not selling.
Right. How many Rivians are they selling a quarter?
It's fewer. But that doesn't but like Rivian is a niche company that with a very small footprint. Tesla, as Dan is saying, like is selling 400,000
Can I ask you this?
Quarter.
What quarterly number on Cybertrucks do you need before it is something that you will say, okay, that's a number?
We should be looking at Tesla's comparison to the auto market. So like what is the F-150 selling? What is the Ram selling? What are other trucks? Cuz
Chevy Silverado
or the Colorado, David's preferred way of hauling stuff. But as we talked about before the Cybertruck launched, like trucks are the big automotive market in the United States. Like more people own trucks than sedans. And so like we shouldn't be like comparing it to Tesla is competing with the Corolla, the Cybertruck is competing with the F-150. Like that should be the comparison. And really there's very little evidence that's happening. We should go back and look at like how quickly the Hummer sold in its early days. Like one of these like kind of novelty trucks, whether it's even reached that status.
Let's do that. If you were to do that in this, I'll give you 7 days to do that. And the next Tuesday, we'll talk about it. Maybe the demand is indeed there because Dana, right, we know they still have supply issues with just cranking them out enough. I don't know. I thought 20,000 was a significant number. Max is having none of it.
So I think one thing to look for tomorrow when we get the sales figures is Tesla doesn't even break out the Cybertruck. They basically are like, we sell the 3 and the Y, and then there's quote unquote other vehicles, which is the S, the X, and the Cybertruck. So until the company even breaks out how many they sell, like I'm not going to get excited.
Dana, the reason we've got to bring it up is just to get Max worked up. That's really the only reason we talk about the Cybertruck on this show. Last point on Tesla, stock is back up on the year now. Erased all of its losses, Dana.
Right, because what's coming, I mean, David, have you forgotten what 1010 is? The big event next week?
Right. I forgot. We got to get excited. Our watch party for the big Robotaxi.
And also these sales figures in China, the fact that interest rates appear to be coming down. There are like a bunch of reasons to feel more optimistic about this company than before. I did see Cybertruck in New York City in matte blue. It was a wrap and sort of deep blue. And I got to admit, it looked kind of cool.
There we go. Bang. Capitulation from Max Chapkin. So with that, I'm moving on. Max and Dana, goodbye to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have for you a special little treat. Kurt Wagner did that interview with Jack Sweeney. Now, Kurt, when you were in high school playing big man on campus, doing keg stands and superstar quarterback of the football team, Sweeney was doing real stuff, right? I mean, he was speaking truth to power. Tell us about your interview with him.
He was. Jack Sweeney, still just in college, by the way, down in Florida, is perhaps better known as the creator of ElonJet, the Twitter account that tracks Elon's private planes. So, this is where it takes off from, where it's headed, what time it took off, what time it landed, how many, the CO2 emissions that were emitted during the trip. So he's been publishing this information, which is publicly available. You do got to hunt for it, but he knows how to do that. And he's been publishing this for the last several years. And, we get into a lot of the drama that's unfolded for him in his life since then, because as you can imagine, Elon is not a fan of people necessarily knowing when he takes off in his private plane and where he's headed.
Yeah, there certainly are some trials and tribulations along the way. Those come up in the interview. I listened to it last night. I thought it was a hoot, and I think you all will too. Let's give it a listen.
Hello, Jack Sweeney, the creator of ElonJet. Welcome to Elon Inc. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. A lot to talk about, and it'll be interesting.
We have a lot to talk about. Absolutely. No, we're so excited to have you on. I want to start, I think probably by this point, a lot of our listeners may be familiar with ElonJet. We're obviously going to get into what that is, but I actually want to start with you and sort of give people just a quick background on who Jack is. Give us the rundown, because I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear you're still in college.
Yeah, so back in high school, I'm a senior now in college, about to graduate. I've always been this kid who's been interested in tech and things like that, and I was interested in Tesla and SpaceX. Like at some point, I became aware that Elon Musk had a private jet. I kind of knew about flight tracking because my dad was familiar, or he's in the aviation industry, so I was familiar that flight tracking existed, and I took what I knew from computers, flight tracking, and all that during COVID, and just kind of built up the idea that I had for a while.
So explain to people how this works exactly. I think there's a misconception that a lot of what you post is maybe private or not, publicly available. It is publicly available. How do you get this information that you're, sharing with everybody about the private jet activity?
Yeah, so, the United States with FAA and then everywhere else around the world, all the planes are mandated to have transponders, and the transponders are transmitting their tail number and where they are, with their speed, their altitude, all that telemetry. And that can be picked up with like 250 miles of like from the ground to any plane that's in that range. But so I have hobbyists all around the world, like 1,000 of them, sending data all into a central server. And there's different networks like this that exist that are even bigger than mine. And then once you have that data, you can compare it to like registration databases. And so, like, for instance, you can look up Elon's plane and it's registered to a subsidiary of SpaceX that's registered at the same location as SpaceX, their address. And like that way, it's his plane, and then you start tracking it with that data. And the other thing is, like, Elon's tail number is N628TS, and his birthday is 6/28, and TS is Tesla and SpaceX. So it's almost like some of these things that these celebrities and billionaires, they don't want to be tracked, but then they do something like that makes them obvious, and they're not really taking full advantage of what they could be doing to hide the tracking. It's all automatic posting, the programs.
Yeah, I mean, Elon, of course, has pushed back on this. We'll get into that in a sec. At what point were you aware that he was aware of the account, right? Like, was there a certain, I'm sure when you first launched this, maybe you thought, maybe he'll see this, maybe he won't see this, but at a certain stage, he clearly saw it. When did you become aware that he knew what you were doing?
So back in December 2020, I believe is the year, he flew to Hawaii, and someone quote retweets it, and then Elon sees it, and he just replies, visiting Larry Ellison, blah, 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 because, that's one of his friends, and he gets, like, business advice from him. No problem with it then. And then, like, a year later, December 2021, he DMs me. It's like 1 a.m. for me, and I'm like, wow, that's unbelievable. And, like, then we're messaging for, like, probably, like, a month, like, every week or so. Like, he says something, or, like, I say something, and he's asking me how it works.
And what's he saying to you when he reached out to you? Like, was it a complimentary?
No, at that point, he's like, I don't like this, basically, But he was asking how it worked.
Okay.
Like, he has a strong distaste for the FAA already, and that's another reason why. He's like, air traffic control is so primitive, blah, 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 And I would say he's right about that. Like, in general, if you're familiar with the aviation industry, it's behind with the times.
You're now having a dialogue with him. At this point, are you feeling like, hey, this is pretty cool? Like, this is a guy you look up to, and now he's in your DMs. What is going through your mind when you start to have a conversation with him?
It's like you're really, like, trying to think about what he's thinking. And, I don't want to, like, make him mad, but at the same time, I'm still going to hold, like, what I think. He offers me $5,000 at some point to stop.
And I think you countered, right?
Yeah, it was like $50,000 or a Tesla.
50,000, yeah, or a Tesla. That was good. Did you ever get close? Like, did you ever think he'd actually take that offer for you to pull it down?
He said he was considering it, and then he was, at some point, he's like, it doesn't feel right to pay to take this down.
Well, he ended up paying a lot more to take it down. A lot more to take it down. Bought Twitter to take it down.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were aware of this, that in January of 2022, Elon at this point is complaining to the CEO of Twitter, Parag Agrawal, and saying, hey, you got to take down ElonJet.
So, yeah, it's like it's about the same time. So, like, during December, he's not happy with me. So then he switches to the CEO.
And I think what's interesting about that timing is that that's the same month he starts building a stake in Twitter.
What's interesting is there's an account right around when I was suspended on all my accounts.
Well, the timing is certainly interesting. Now that okay, he's reaching out to you, he's reaching out to the CEO, nobody's taking this account down, and suddenly he starts building a stake in the company. Do you think maybe he had an issue, or he wanted to sort of like have a stake in Twitter so that he'd have more say in whether or not your account existed?
That's definitely part of it, I would think. Like, The timing is too close. It just feels like he has a really strong distaste towards me and like the account. Like, you ever watch like interviews of him and someone brings up ElonJet? It's not like it's a product of mine. He makes it like about me, and he like hates it. Yeah.
Yeah. He buys the company. And I believe at the point he said something in late 2022 after
November.
November of 2022. He says something along the lines of like, I believe in free speech so much, I'm not even going to suspend, this account that's tracking my plane.
Yeah, my commitment to free speech.
Are you reading it? You turn your head, you have it written on the wall or something?
Yeah, I do.
Read it for us. What does it say?
My commitment to free speech extends even to not banning the account following my plane, even though that is a direct personal safety risk.
That's right. So that's what he tweets in November.
Yeah.
By December, you're suspended, right? So what happens with like your side of the story here from November when he says, I'm going to let this account exist, to December when he decides to ban you?
Yeah, so I was like, thank you. I appreciate that. Like, and then that's December. And then December 12th and 13th, I get an email about someone inside Twitter leaking that my account has visibility filtering. And so I post that and I make it public. And then like, that's on the news. There's articles all about that during the weekend. And then December 15th, I wake up and like all of my accounts are suspended. And then for like a brief little bit of time, they get unsuspended. I tweet something that's like, can I have my $8 back or something? And then it all gets suspended again. Like, I don't know what the discrepancy is. And then like a few hours later, like Elon comes out with this tweet that like, he said that his kid was being followed in a car.
So we're going to take a quick step back. So two important things I think you just pointed out. The first is this idea of visibility filtering, right? Which is essentially limiting the distribution of a particular account, but without telling anybody, right? Like you weren't alerted, at least not officially from Twitter. It's not like they said, hey, Jack, we're going to, cut distribution of ElonJet. They just do it behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And I think we know that did indeed happen because Walter Isaacson wrote that in his biography of Elon that then came out later, that, he basically cut your distribution. I think the interesting thing a few days later, like the quick backstory for those who don't recall, is that Elon lands in LA. The account is tracking his plane, lands in LA. 24 hours later, supposedly a stalker follows a Tesla that, he thinks that Elon's in, but it's really Elon's son who's in the Tesla. And there's a stalker incident at like a gas station where they call the cops and all this stuff. And Elon, I will say as a father, rightfully sort of freaks out in the sense of like he thinks his young son is in danger. But his reaction is not really to be mad at the stalker. It's to go after you, right? He says, my young son's in danger. And this is all because of Jack and the fact that he tracked my plane to LA. Even though that incident happened 24 hours later, like, 30 miles away or whatever it may be, did you feel like, have you ever thought to yourself, well, maybe putting the fact that he landed in LA did, put him in danger? Like, does that seem reasonable at all to you, or does that seem just crazy?
Not for that event at all. Like, it's just like way too many disconnects between that and the facts we know.
Yeah.
And like, that night, so like he does those tweets, and then everybody that posts about ElonJet being suspended, there's tons of journalists that also get suspended.
Okay, so your account gets suspended. This is December 2022, like a month after he takes over the platform. I think ultimately he comes to sort of this compromise where he says, you can't track someone's location in real time, but if you wait 24 hours, you can post his plane's location, but now it's on a 24-hour delay. Yeah. Do you feel you're still doing it? So clearly you still see value in posting it even though it's delayed.
Yeah, the thing is, he posted, like a day after, he posted like, should I unban the accounts that did this or whatever? And, everyone votes yes. All the journalists get unsuspended, but I don't. And it's like, why wasn't I given that chance? Like, he changed the rules, suspended me back like for stuff I did before changing the rules. So I was never given a chance, like with those accounts.
Yeah.
And the ElonJet next day on Twitter and my personal account, those are new accounts.
That's right. So you had to start over in terms of followers and stuff. I'm curious if you've learned anything from having followed him as closely as you have, right? I mean, I've learned a ton following ElonJet. I think I told you this when I wrote a book about Twitter, Battle for the Bird. I relied on ElonJet a lot just to know where he was on particular days, where he was going. And even employees were using it to track, like, when's the boss going to be in the office?
Yeah. Even the early days, I remember I could see, like, there were, like, executives that, like, would be following it from Tesla or SpaceX.
Yeah. What have you learned about him, though? Have you picked up behaviors or tendencies or anything, unique as someone who's followed him this closely?
He definitely spends, like, way more time on X than SpaceX or Tesla now, at least in person. He used to visit Brownsville so much for Starbase, Texas, for SpaceX. And it's a lot of San Jose now, which is like how he gets to San Francisco and Austin. And the other thing is like about him personally, like, I think he's smart, but like he'll have like these impulsive things that he's not necessarily true about, that he thinks he's like right about. As someone maybe in power, like his tweets have kind of like a little bit gone out of control. Like even I noticed like there's typos and I'm like, come on, like he's like, starships are meant to fly, and it said starships are mean to fly. Like,
needs that edit button, I guess. Well, Jack, really appreciate you coming on Elon Inc.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Naomi Shavin and Rehan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rehan. Blake Maples handles engineering and Dave Purcell fact checks. Our supervising producer is Magnus Henriksen. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Noonan is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks, as always, to our supporter Joel Weber. I'm David Papadopoulos. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us. See you next week.